Hello everyone and welcome to my filthy desk where I'm about to start setting up my May bullet journal, and this one is inspired by the very beautiful and totally on the bucket list country of Sweden. So I do hope you enjoy what I choose to illustrate for this month, and let's get into it. So if you are not new here, you will know that I always like to start my cover page as a really intricate, full-on illustration, just because it's great practice and it's something I really enjoy doing. When I think of any Scandinavian country, my mind immediately goes to the design, that kind of folk art. It's quite intricate with lots of little florals, but it's also quite graphic and simplified. And I really wanted to try and work that into my cover page and make the wording part a little bit more special for the entry to my May. So that's what I started with, a little bit of Scandinavian folk art design for my cover. And I'm using my dip pen because I'm just in love with it at the moment. I do plan on making a lot more content showing you how to use that and how I'm enjoying using it, because I'm really loving it. And I know a lot of you on here like to see some calligraphy work. So if you're keen on that, just let me know. And I didn't have any green ink to use, so I did make this from gouache and water mixed together, and it just gives you the right consistency to use with your dip pen. So that was really fun as well. It does double the process though, because you have to paint it onto the dip pen itself rather than just dipping it in. I suppose if I had the right container, actually I could have made enough to dip it in. That might be something to try next time. But anyway, as you can see, I'm having a lot of fun just drawing some nice little patterns. This is such a simple idea for someone who doesn't perhaps want to spend as much time as I do into their journals, or they're just doodling in their own sketchbook. Try this technique, it's really cool. Just lots of little floral patterns linked together. Try and keep the spacing sort of similar between each element, and I think that's where you get that folk art look coming through. And then the text I decided to color in bold so that you can actually read it a little bit clearer, and then just fill that with some cool little patterns as well, which tied it all together. Now, Sweden is known for its beautiful landscapes. It's full of forests and lakes and just generally gorgeous natural wonder and beauty. And this isn't dissimilar to all the other Nordic countries, and I have explored all 5 of the Nordic Scandinavian countries, which are Norway, Finland, Iceland, now Sweden, and Denmark as well. So if you want to see more about those kind of things that you can spot up in this area of the world, then check out those other videos. I'll have them linked down below because there is a lot of ties between them. So I tried to find some unique items to look into for this month's setup. And so one of the first things that I really enjoyed reading about is a celebration called Midsummer. And in Sweden, they have this day of the year. I think it's around June 24th or June 19th actually, which is my birthday. So I remember thinking like, oh, how funny that my birthday falls on one of the longest days. So Midsummer celebrates the very longest day of the summer, so of the year, and it's where the sun never sets. So can you imagine just having a big celebration that just lasts all night, yet it feels like a sunsetty daytime event? I think it just sounds really cool to explore, and the images I was seeing in my head made for like a really cute cover page design with my girl in it. So that was my concept behind it. Now, Midsummer is historically a celebration of fertility. So apparently there's a lot of Swedish birthdays 9 months later, so it gives you an idea of some of the activities they get up to. But of course it's really about celebrating together with all the loved ones, family and friends, making big lunches and celebrations that include, I think, salmon and pickled herring and new potatoes, and drinking lots of schnapps, and then dancing and singing around the maypole, which is a large structure that they rise up in the garden, and you usually have to go out to the countryside for this celebration. So apparently like the cities like Stockholm and stuff would just get quite empty because everyone goes out to the countryside to a house and has their celebration with all the family and friends, drinking and eating and dancing into the wee hours of the morning. So I thought that would be a really cute idea to illustrate. So I've got my girl here, she's making a floral wreath for her head. So the ladies and the girls tend to do this in preparation for Midsummer, and they'll just find beautiful flowers from in the countryside, string them together to make some wreaths for their head, and also to decorate the maypole as well. So just lots of nature and just white, pure tones everywhere. And it just made for a really interesting piece for me personally. And I was also desperate to use my acrylagouache that I ended up buying in Singapore last month, and so I wanted to try and stick to a simplified palette using what I had, and I actually really like the color palette that ended up coming out of this. Now, I did actually film all of my sketching process, but then when I've put the footage in to edit this, it is so dark that it's actually hurting my eyes looking at it, so it's surely going to hurt your eyes. So sorry that you missed the sketching part of it. I had a lot of fun doing that sketch part because I have mentioned before I'm trying to work on my sort of characterization of bodies and anatomy. I lost my little challenge that I started earlier in the year about sketching every day. That was way too difficult with life. Life is getting so busy here at my place. We're currently doing 7 days of basketball now. Both my daughters play. One of my daughters plays for 2 teams, so it means like 5 sessions of basketball for her. And then I've got 2 sessions with my other daughter, and then I play. Luckily, my husband is an absolute basketball fanatic, so he doesn't mind having to go to all of these sessions. But the poor guy, he had to stop basketball last year, I think. So yeah, at least he still gets to be around it constantly as we are living and breathing it at the moment. So it's just getting a little bit full on and hard to find the time to, one, work on the content for my channel, but also work on extra sketching. So I've kind of put that on the back burner, and I'm just doing my best to stay afloat at the moment. So hopefully I figure out something that can help through that, because I'm sure you all know what it's like to be stressed and want to make changes so that you can have a little bit more of a balanced life. And I'm definitely all about that balance, so I will let you know when I figure things out as I go. But yeah, back to the illustration here. I love these Swedish houses, and you see them all the time in like visions of Swedish countryside, and so I had to draw one of those. So it just worked out perfectly that my subject, you won't know that it's in Sweden unless you sort of place elements into it. So I thought I would place her in a little scenery of in the countryside at a long sun-setting time with the maypole and the gorgeous wreath and everything. So I'm hoping you get the vibe that I was going for here. And the technique that I was using is a little bit different to my usual stuff. I really tried to hold back on perfecting anything. I tried to do shading, but in a more graphic way. So there was no gradation between tones and stuff. I just tried to keep it in shapes of shade so that you could get a little bit of depth in it. But I really wanted to try and keep it as flat as I could, so that at least she stood out from the background a little bit. And then I avoided as much as possible going around and outlining everything. I think it looks a little bit more relaxed now that I didn't do that. But yeah, I'm happy with how it turned out, and I think it's going to really complement the page that I did just before with the May title on it, and it'll give that really floral vibe that I was going for. If you like this cover in particular, I have created this into a downloadable printable theme for you to use in your own journals at home, or just to print out and frame, I guess. That is available over on my online shop, so I'll leave the link for that down below. And here she is, ready to be stuck into the journal. Always the funnest part, removing the tape to reveal those clean edges, and then you can really see how the piece finished. It's always a little bit distracting with the washi tape that I use in particular, but it just inspires me, and this one was so well suited to the theme I was going for. And then once I have that, I just trim it out down to my A5 size for my journal and put some round corners on it and stick it in. I must say my favorite part of this is the color palette, but the fact that it looks so warm, and I would never have thought to do a pink sky, but because I had limited myself to a particular palette, it just sort of was the only thing that would work, and I love it. I love that the skin and the sky are matching. And here's how she looks stuck down next to my May title page. And now we're moving on to the following page, which is my gratitude and goodliness or habit tracking page. Now my goal for this page was to keep in mind that really Nordic design style and try and keep it quite simplistic. So I really love the patterns like I used on the front. I had so much fun doing that title page, but I kind of wanted to keep that going. So yes, I'm using my dip pen again. This time I'm using just my normal black Sumi ink that I have with it. And I wanted to do a really nice, what I believe is kind of a Scandinavian font. So it's a really elongated calligraphy style. I love how natural it feels and really relaxed, and it's really fun to work with this particular one. Now, the word I chose to write at the top of my gratitude page this month is the Swedish word for love, which is älskar. My reasoning for this word is partly due to the fact that I just like the sound of the word, and then secondly, I love the dots. And I just think that gratitude is about what you love, finding the elements of your day you love, finding love in any area of your life. So I thought that would be a cute way of reminding me, and hopefully I never forget this word, älskar. And then moving on to the other side of this page, I'm writing the word fika. Now, fika is another word that I found really fun and interesting. It basically means coffee break. And I know that it's quite common in the Nordic countries to just love the coffee experience, but I read that Swedes in particular really value their coffee breaks. It's a time for them to be mindful and re-energize and sort of take that moment to de-stress and just be at peace and just like catch up. And I really like that idea. And I like the thought that they've named it and labeled it so that it has a really powerful presence. Everyone needs a fika to help with their day and get ready for the rest of what their commitments are. So I really liked that, and I thought that worked quite well with habit tracking and gratitude. It's sort of all tied together nicely. Not to mention the fact that I feel like fika is essential in my own life. I don't necessarily drink coffee, but I definitely need my tea break. And there's nothing better with tea than something sweet. And I know the Swedes love to have the cinnamon buns with their coffee. So I just thought I would do a little illustration of that down on the right-hand side as well. Now jumping back to what I'm illustrating now, which is the national animal of Sweden, which is the moose. And instead of drawing a moose realistic like I normally would, I decided to keep hold of my dip pen and illustrate it in that style I was talking about, that sort of folk art look, but then also tie it to a very famous brand of Sweden called IKEA. We all know and love it. My whole house is basically IKEA, so I'm a huge fan of IKEA. And I can just picture a plywood moose made at IKEA. So that's why I've illustrated it this way, just like a really simplified version of a moose that's all formed together like with pieces, which I haven't seen a lot of recently, but I know that just makes me think of IKEA, those kind of merged together pieces to create something quite modern and Scandi inspired. Yeah, and then surrounding those elements, the cinnamon bun, the coffee, and the moose, I'm just tying it in with those little Scandi floral elements that I think just add so much interest. And then lately I have lost touch of my gold a little bit. So thank you for the reminder, Jennifer White, in my comments of the last video. I had strayed away from it, and that reminder was good to take a step back and see that maybe I'd been putting too much color into it, and maybe that's why I was feeling a little bit burnt out. So by doing this gold and black, it really highlighted to me how much quicker things can be and how cute they can be with just two simple colors. And I'm so happy that I brought it back because I forgot how much I love gold accents on my pages. So yeah, to make this one come to life, I just put a lot of patterns in with the gold and a gold border, and then put in my trackers for the month for me to follow. And now I can move on to my favorite page, which is the mind map for this month. You all know this is the spot where I put ideas that come to me throughout the month, or things I have to remember that don't have a space in the rest of the journal. And it's a very valuable place to practice my portraits as well. Now, this month's practice was super fun. I had such a good time working on this particular piece. So firstly, I decided to have a look at Swedish artists, in particular portrait artists, and there's one that came to mind straight away when I was doing Sweden, and that is an artist called Anders Zorn. He is a well-known Impressionist artist who was thought to have used a really limited palette. So there's something called the Zorn palette, which focuses on just using 4 colors. And those 4 colors are what I decided to do my portrait with. So it's using a white, a black, and then a vermilion and a yellow ochre. And from those 4 colors, you can create a really nice range, but you definitely cannot get any blue tones into the portrait at all. So I thought, oh, what a nice challenge to work on, and I'll try and do it in that Impressionist way as well. So if you're not familiar with Impressionism, it's usually a painting that's done on site, usually landscapes, and is quite colourful, but mainly the brush strokes are really relaxed and quite soft. And then when you go further away, the painting looks a little bit more clearer. So I tried to avoid detail and just be really relaxed with my paintbrush and play lots with the brush strokes that I was making. Now this technique tied really nicely to my subject because I decided to paint a very well-known classic lady called Ingrid Bergman. So she was a Swedish actress from the 1940s, and obviously her style and that kind of age really lends itself to this kind of portrait. So the 2 elements of doing the limited palette and the soft portrait really worked with this subject. So I'm pretty stoked about that and really enjoyed myself creating this piece. So I did start with mapping out my subject in pencil, and then I'm going over the top with just a little bit of black brush pen just to give me a base for when I'm laying down my color, because I didn't want to go over all the proportions that I just mapped out. I wanted to make sure they're in the right spot, so needed to see those underneath my painting. And then it was time to get cracking in color mixing, which is so much fun when you've just got 4 colors, because creating the skin tones meant you could start with the white base, add a little bit of red to make it pink, then add a little yellow to make it more warm and orange, and then the black, add a little touch of that to just sort of grey it up and make it less saturated. And then eventually you kind of get this skin tone working, and it's really cool to see how that all comes together. It's always a little nerve-wracking when you lay those first tones down on the page, because they do look a little bit bold and saturated, and you're wondering, oh my gosh, can I save this? But just keep working at it and working through, because you can always add on top, and that's definitely what I did. I didn't start out with the correct colors, but I was able to build it up and change it as I went. So it was a really fun process. Now a little bit about Ingrid Bergman. She was born in 1915 in Stockholm, Sweden, and went on to become an absolute Hollywood legend and icon. She's really known for the movie Casablanca, which I am embarrassed to say I've never seen. I would like to though, and especially now reading into her a little bit and painting her, you become familiar with the subject. So I'd really like to watch that now. And then she has won so many awards, 3 Academy Awards, and actually she's one of only 4 actresses to have received at least 3 Acting Academy Awards. She's also had heaps of others, including Golden Globes, BAFTAs, Tonys, Emmys. So a very, very well-established lady, and her career actually spanned 5 decades. So it was definitely worth putting her into my journal. There was other actresses that I never knew were Swedish, and one in particular who's more of a recent one. Her name is Rebecca Ferguson, and she's been in movies like the Mission Impossibles and Reminiscence with Hugh Jackman. Don't know if you've seen it. But anyway, as I was looking at this girl, I was getting so many vibes of Ingrid Bergman. I think they look so similar, and to think that they were both Swedish, I found that really interesting. And then the other thing I did want to mention as well is Ingrid Bergman, I had no idea that her daughter is Isabella Rossellini, and Rossellini's face, when I saw a picture of her, it made me think of the movie Death Becomes Her, which Isabella Rossellini is in, and that's how I knew her face. And I just realized how similar she looks to her mum, Ingrid Bergman. So I just love getting all these connections that I had no idea of who was related to who. But yeah, I found that one interesting. And actually, it was quite scandalous that Isabella Rossellini was born out of wedlock to Ingrid Bergman and the director Roberto Rossellini on one of her movies. And yeah, so that was like a big thing back in the day. She was an extremely beautiful lady and very independent, had an interesting life from, sad childhood of losing both her parents and 3 husbands in a tricky day and age to be doing that. But then just being absolutely revered from all her colleagues, and the people that she worked with just loved her for her art and her personality, and she just sounds like a pretty awesome lady. And then once the portrait was done, which I had such a blast doing, I decided to add the national flower onto this page. And the national flower of Sweden is the beautiful bluebell, also known as the Campanula rotundifolia, which sounds a lot more Italian than I think it needed to be. But this flower is a beautiful purple, like a lavendery sort of color, and it's complementary to the warmth of the tones that I've got in this portrait. So I was very happy to use that purple. And then I added some gold because why not? And I've actually always wondered how national flowers get to become national flowers. And it turns out that Sweden actually did a vote on the national flower for Sweden back in 2021, and 81,000 people decided that the bluebell should be their national flower. So it's quite a democratic way of deciding, and I think it started with presenting your 10 top flowers, and then they narrowed it down and chose like that. So 81,000 people ended up choosing this particular flower. So I thought that was pretty cool to learn. And then because of the whole vibe I was getting from each page so far, I wanted to stick with that really regal calligraphic sort of font style, and used my dip pen again to write the words mind map. And that just finished it off. And I think I love when the subject ties into the theme so nicely. And I think this Ingrid portrait is probably one of my favorites so far. I love how loose it is and not too detailed, not too fine, and something that I'm really trying to get better at. And I feel really happy that it kind of looks like her, and it gives me the right effect. Like I can tell it's a painting, and it just feels nice to practice a new technique and feel successful at it. So I hope you guys like it as well. And this is how my mind map page turned out. And now turning over for the last pages of this setup, which are my weekly layouts. And these weeklies are what keep me on track every day of the year. I definitely have become reliant on these and fill them full of all the things I need to do every day. So I did find that this May month starts on a Monday. I was pretty excited to just have 4 full weeks, and then plus 3 little days that I could tack on to the end. So I actually used this opportunity to merge them into 2 pages. So I thought I'd do a week per page. So I only needed 4 pages, if you know what I mean, 2 double spreads, and that will get our whole month sorted in those 2 days. So I decided to do that layered effect that I love to do on my weeklies, but only with the 2 pages. And the front one is going to be the Vasa shipwreck. Now this amazing treasure is a 64-gun warship that sank on its maiden voyage back in 1628. And it was basically sunk to the bottom of the ocean of Stockholm and was brought up to the surface in 1961. And then rightly so, it was such a popular attraction that they ended up making a full museum dedicated to this Vasa ship in 1990. So this 330-something-year-old ship is 98% intact, and it is the only 17th century ship in the world that is like that. So it is pretty incredible, and it's the most visited museum in Scandinavia. So definitely wanted to get this in here. What a place to visit and really see a piece of history. They've also got elements from the ship that they've salvaged, the dining stuff, or tools and weapons and personal effects. So I think it would be really interesting to walk around and get a real feel for how it was back in the day. So I wanted to draw that in the foreground on my first page, and then behind that on the next weekly's page, I had to include my favorite little city stretch because I just love the buildings. As we know from the past journeys that I've been on in my journal, There's something about these tall, tightly packed buildings along little canals, and Stockholm is one of the very famous ones. It's a city full of bridges and canals, and these little buildings are just the cutest, and they happen to be in the similar tones and colors that I've been using throughout this setup, so worked perfectly. So yes, I placed my hand with the Pigma Micron fine liner and got to work on drawing some of the little apartment buildings. They're just so beautiful. I swear everywhere you look in these kind of old towns or old European cities is just like art everywhere. And I'm just dying to visit Sweden. The cobblestone streets of the old town and the little buildings and the royal palace. I think it would be just such an amazing place to go to. So it's another location definitely on the bucket list. As I mentioned earlier, this whole theme is available to purchase from my website, but if you are wanting to get it for free by supporting me and my art practice, head to my Patreon page, which is linked down in the description box, where you get a whole bunch of freebies and insight into behind the scenes, and includes these monthly theme packages. A big thank you to my current patrons, who I will put on screen now. Your support is always hugely appreciated, and I look forward to providing you with more content as we go through this 2023 that is going too fast for my liking. Now, don't forget, if you feel I've missed some essential ingredients from Sweden, perhaps it's because I've touched on them in its close neighbouring countries of Scandinavia. So do check out those other ones if you're interested in learning a little bit more. But for now, I hope you enjoyed what I set up, and here's a look back at what we created for the month of May in our Sweden theme. Now, the votes when we decided for Sweden were quite tight between Sweden and Spain. So I have decided that I will do Spain for next month. So let's visit Spain in June and join me here for the setup in a few weeks' time. I do hope to get some other videos up between now and then. But as I said, life is pretty hectic at the moment, so I will do my best. In the meantime, I hope you have a great May, and I hope you are enjoying yourself, whatever you're doing, staying balanced. That's all I can recommend. So yeah, take it easy, take care of each other, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye bye.